Courtney Clenney was 25 years old when her boyfriend returned home one day in 2022 and the two got into a serious argument. She called 911 later that day, saying things got out of hand and her boyfriend was now unresponsive by the time police got there. But more than a year later, prosecutors found a chilling phone call in which Courtney threatened her boyfriend's life less than a month before the 911 call. To top this off, her statements to police have never aligned with the evidence that was found at the scene of the crime. And detectives now think there's much more to the story than Courtney Clenney is leading them to believe. So this case, for all the obvious reasons, is a really weird one. The case has been covered countless times on social media, mainstream media, and there are so many theories surrounding Courtney Clenney that it's hard to determine fact from fiction. But I'm gonna do my best to relay the story in a way that makes sense and sticks as close to the truth as possible, even though court proceedings haven't concluded just yet. Courtney Clenney is a self-claimed Texas girl who was born in Midland, Texas in 1996 and lived there for much of her childhood. She became the center of attention from a very young age, always pursuing her passion for modeling and everything that comes along with that lifestyle. She began modeling when she was just 12 years old or 13 years old, getting started in 2003 when her family uprooted and decided to move from Midland, Texas to Austin, Texas. Once here, she began taking classes on modeling and acting and began starring in commercials, officially beginning her career in the industry. But for the next 10 years or so, Courtney more or less faded from the spotlight. There isn't much of a public record or any sort of paper trail concerning Courtney until nearly 12 years later in 2015. She was charged with public intoxication in California around this time, but it doesn't seem like that deterred her from drinking, because just a few weeks later, she was arrested again for drunk driving. This time, she was sentenced to serve just 3 days in prison, even though she could have easily taken someone's life or lost her own. But after this, she received a small role in a low-budget film, but that was pretty much all that Courtney had going for her, until she discovered OnlyFans. We don't know for sure when Courtney began her career as an online model, so to speak, but the evidence leads me to believe this must have taken place sometime around 2019 or 2020. Obviously, OnlyFans isn't traditional modeling, but it's certainly a type of modeling. I suppose for Courtney, this is when her life really began to take a turn. Courtney seems to have discovered OnlyFans at a fairly low point in her life, and this seems to be a trend with most people in this type of industry. More often than not, people resort to extreme measures when they have no other option. And from what I've read about former models online and in interviews, the vast majority of them regret their decisions later in life when they realize that once something's out on the internet, it's pretty much there forever. This isn't a job that you can just quit and move on. You can never truly leave an industry like this because the images, videos, and messages you put out there during that time have been saved, shared, and pinned on more websites than you could ever realistically count. Unfortunately, Courtney Clenney fell into this same trap. Courtney had hoped to make a living off of modeling, and she did do fairly well for herself in her younger years. But she was chasing much bigger dreams and a much bigger paycheck. So when she learned about how she could potentially make hundreds of thousands of dollars by pursuing a slightly different form of modeling, she jumped at the opportunity. This all took place sometime around 2019 or 2020, and she began posting to OnlyFans and gathered a small following at first. But the more she uploaded and live streamed, the more fans continued to pour in. Before she knew it, Courtney had struck gold with her new employment. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of fans showed up for Courtney's uploads, and before long, she was bringing in more money than you could ever imagine. At one point, it was rumored that Courtney made more than $3 million in less than a week. Now, I couldn't verify this claim because her bank records obviously aren't public knowledge, but based on reports from other models in this industry, this seems like a pretty realistic number, and I see no reason to doubt it. For Courtney, everything was looking up. She was finally becoming the model she had always dreamed of, and she had more money than she could possibly spend in her lifetime. But little did she know that all of this was about to come tumbling down faster than anyone could have believed. Sometime in 2020, Courtney met a man named Christian Obumseli. Even though Courtney had become a social media star and had begun sharing virtually every detail of her life online, we don't really know much about the beginning of this relationship. All we know for sure is that the two met in Austin sometime during the pandemic, and they moved to Florida later on to start their new life together. They'd been living in a luxury apartment in Miami, living the literal dream for many people. Now, I'm gonna do my best to choose my words carefully here because I know there are many people out there who are fans of this particular type of lifestyle, and they're more than willing to follow anyone and everyone on social media to live vicariously through them, experiencing all that the celebrity lifestyle has to offer secondhand. And that's totally fine, I guess, it's just not my cup of tea. But to put it nicely, it doesn't seem like Courtney Clenney had any deep feelings towards Christian. Now, I'm sure as time passed by, the two grew to care for one another quite a bit, but for Courtney, it seems like their relationship began for a pretty strange reason, and I'm not sure if Christian was aware of this. But in an interview with We in Miami, a popular local podcast, Courtney opened up about her time working for OnlyFans. She admitted to the host that she was making a lot of money from her new career, usually bringing in 6 figures a month at a minimum. But she also opened up about something else that was pretty telling about Courtney's personality and life choices. When asked about the guys that she dated, there seemed to be a pattern forming. The host asked if she only dated rich guys. Courtney agreed but corrected the host, clarifying that she only dates rich black guys. Now, at the risk of getting canceled and having this whole show shut down, I'm just gonna leave that statement as it is. I'm not gonna comment any further on that, but you can draw your own conclusions, and I bet we're on the same page here. If you haven't already pieced it together, Courtney and Christian's relationship clearly wasn't the healthiest. After Courtney's remarks about why she began dating Christian in the first place, it's pretty clear to see where her head was at during this time of her life. But things only got worse in 2021, when police were finally called to the home of Courtney and Christian. According to police records, in July of 2021, officers were called to their home after a fight had broken out. Now, we don't know who started the argument, and honestly that's completely irrelevant, because by the end of it, Courtney had begun to throw punches and was seriously abusive towards Christian. Investigators say that they took a statement from Christian, in which he claimed that Courtney had assaulted him and she'd begun to throw things at him, including shards of glass and other sharp objects, all aimed at his head. From the best I can tell, Christian never threw a punch, nor did he make any aggressive attempts at defending himself. He seems to have called the police to try to de-escalate the situation, but then dropped the charges a month later when he and Courtney reconciled. But this wasn't the end of the squabbles between the two. According to court documents and various police records, officers were called to their home and charges were filed time and time again. Each time, tenants from the apartment building and other residents from the local area reported the two for arguing, fighting one another, shouting, and generally being unpleasant to be around. It seems that these two were constantly at each other's throats, and most of the blame often fell on Courtney, though Christian certainly played a part as well. At the very least, Christian can be blamed for not walking away or ending the relationship entirely. But truthfully, most of these reports seem to target Courtney as the assailant. There was even security footage captured in February of 2022 that showed Courtney repeatedly striking at Christian in an elevator. Christian mostly keeps his cool, though he did eventually lay a hand on Courtney a couple of times to get her off of him. But the whole while, Courtney is seen striking him in the face, attempting to pull his hair and pushing him multiple times. Just a month after this CCTV footage was recorded, the unthinkable happened when Courtney could no longer control her rage and she unleashed on Christian. The Miami-Dade state attorney said it best when she commented on the case and said, quote, "The defendant was aggressively attacking Christian. She was extremely tempestuous and combative. The violent and toxic 2-year relationship of Christian Obumseli and Courtney Clenney did not have to end in tragedy." A timeline of events was pieced together by police officers mere days after the crime took place. Key fob records from the couple's apartment detail the hours and minutes leading up to an argument that the couple would not come back from. At around 1:15 p.m. on April 3rd, 2022, Christian left the apartment building for a few hours. At 4:32, he returned to the apartment with sandwiches from Subway. At this same time, Courtney was finishing up an Instagram video, posting it just minutes later. Courtney's final Instagram video appears to have been a live Q&A that she shared as a reel on April 3rd. Around the time that she filmed this video, she'd spoken with her mother on the phone twice, once at 4:43 p.m. and once at 4:56 p.m. During both of these calls, Courtney's mother said Courtney sounded perfectly normal and nothing seemed unusual. The only odd thing to mention was that her mother had heard Courtney shouting at Christian, accusing him of lying about something, but at this point in their relationship, this was an everyday occurrence. Police say that at some point during that 13-minute window between phone calls with her mother, Courtney had committed a crime of serious consequences, claiming Christian's life and leaving him on the apartment floor for several minutes before ever bothering to call for help. According to witnesses who were present the day of the crime, building security had been called around 4:46 p.m. after neighbors heard a major disturbance in Courtney's apartment. We don't know if they arrived immediately afterward or not, but it doesn't seem like they did based on the reports I've been able to gather. It wouldn't be until 4:57 p.m. that Courtney called 911 to report what she had done. According to Courtney, she was forced to defend herself. In the disturbing 911 call, Christian can be heard in the background saying, "I can't feel my arm, I'm dying." He would pass away just minutes later. When officers finally arrived at the scene, Courtney was arrested immediately. There was no evidence that the crime was in self-defense outside of a small bruise on Courtney's shoulder that could have come from literally anything. Investigators who were taking her statements and her confession said that she contradicted herself multiple times during the investigation, proving to them that she wasn't telling the full truth. The coroner's report also doesn't seem to agree with what Courtney claimed. The wound was reportedly 8 centimeters deep and was at a slight downward angle. The coroner and police believed that this was an up-close and personal injury. Prosecutors obviously weren't buying Courtney's story, but a chilling audio recording would only further prove that Courtney was little more than a liar, and now a killer. After a brief investigation, Courtney Clenney was arrested for homicide, with police discovering a disturbing and downright haunting threat made by Courtney just weeks before Christian lost his life. In this recording, which was shared by WSVN, Courtney is heard shouting an expletive-laced rant at Christian, saying, quote, "I'm actually not having a good day where I actually want to kill you, but you don't take me seriously." Now that a serious crime had been committed and there was mounting evidence against Courtney, investigators were willing to take the case a bit more seriously and began looking back over the various reports of assault that had taken place between the couple, dating back to 2020. Several awful tweets also came out, tweets that were posted by Christian when he was in high school, in which he used derogatory remarks towards women of color, proving that he wasn't the clean-cut man that he made himself out to be. By now, investigators had reason to believe that these reports of assault from the last 2 years went both ways, and they'd now begun to believe that Courtney had, in fact, been the victim of Christian all along. But they also had clear evidence that she, too, had victimized Christian. But regardless of all this, police were more interested in what took place on the day of Christian's demise. And the evidence that they had against Courtney was quite clear. If Courtney truly had been the victim of violence during this entire time period, it's fairly easy to see how her anger and resentment may have gotten the better of her. But we have to keep in mind this doesn't erase the crime that she committed. While it certainly provides context, Courtney must still atone for the things that she's done, even if we now have reason to believe that Christian spurred many of these arguments and was equally abusive toward Courtney behind closed doors. In the end, Courtney is now being charged with homicide, but her trial is still ongoing as of the time of filming this video. She appeared in court in February of 2023, but we haven't heard any updates outside of this. But with a case this convoluted and complicated, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear a conclusion in 2023 at all. This is a case that can take years to fully sort out. Courtney is currently in jail awaiting trial, and she's been denied bail, with a judge considering her a flight risk. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. If you liked the video and you like the channel, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. If you want to see more of these videos and help the channel grow, be sure to leave a comment below. Let me know, while Courtney is obviously to blame for taking Christian's life, do you believe that her actions were justified if she truly was the victim of his abuse? Or do you believe that she's nothing more than a cold-blooded killer? But with that, my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.